This is One Ping Only coming to you with my first after action report video for Battlefront's combat mission war game. I will be playing the Tankovyi Desant scenario from the Red Thunder module of combat mission. My opponent will be Bricklord 557. He's going to be the Russian attackers and I will play the German defenders. Per the briefing, it's summer of 1944, and I am commanding a group of German stragglers trying to hold back the Soviet advance. I have what turns out to be a very understrength infantry company to face off against an expected attack by T-34 tanks and infantry. Perhaps the one bright spot is that I do have 3 Sturmgeschütz 3 assault guns, also known as Stugs for short, which have 75mm guns that are effective against the T-34s. I am defending one side of a river, and while my objectives are stated in the briefing to hold the bridge, it looks like I actually score points only for destroying the Soviet tanks and the infantry units. That will be important to my strategy. The map is heavily forested, which provides good cover and concealment both for myself and for an approaching enemy. The river in the center of the map appears to be fordable across its entire length, meaning that even though I'm defending a bridge, the Russians in theory could cross anywhere. The bridge is in the center of the map, and there is a farm which could be used as a Russian base of fire on the opposite bank. I expect the Russians to make a priority of taking the farm, but in reality they could attack the river from any point along this front. Here you can see the river, which really dominates this map. There are wide open fields of fire from my side of the river to the other side. The Russians are going to have to cross a great deal of open terrain in order to get to the river, and hopefully I can use that to my advantage. My primary force is a very understrength infantry company that is deployed close to the river to guard the crossings. They are in sandbag foxholes, but they have no anti-tank weapons, no machine guns, and very few submachine guns. In addition, I have attached a heavy machine gun and a Panzer Schreck tank destroyer team. My last significant firepower is an 81mm mortar in the rear, but it does have limited ammunition. There's an observation post on the north side of the river at a farm. It's manned by a sniper team who's able to look down the road to detect approaching enemy units. And behind the farmhouse I have a Panzerfaust anti-tank team hoping to ambush enemy tanks that may come through the farm. On the left flank, I have a Stug 3 assault gun covering the approaches to the river. It has a nice commanding view. On the right-hand side, I have another Stug. However, this one I'm electing to keep hidden behind an embankment until the enemy makes an appearance. Far in the rear are my only reserves. These consist of the company headquarters, a Stug 3 assault gun, and 1 squad of infantry. I have a handful of mixed anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, which I have put along the road leading to the bridge, hoping to catch the enemy unawares. A potential problem is that the infantry positions are so close to the river, making them fairly easy to spot. However, to move the infantry back further into the forest would deprive them of the foxhole cover and these great fields of fire that they currently have, so I elect to keep them where they are. I am concerned about my left flank. There's not many units between the bridge and the left edge of the map, and this provides a hole that the Russians could exploit. As a result, I do elect to move my Stug from my reserves down a narrow forest road closer to the river so it can help plug that gap. After a few minutes, the Russians appear at the farmhouse. Firing through the windows, they manage to ambush the Panzerfaust team. Neither one survives. Almost as quickly, the sniper team is engaged from the farmhouse. Oh! As expected, no mercy is shown. On the left flank across the river, the first T-34-85 is spotted, loaded with troops. My Stug on the left flank spots it and engages, scoring a hit. A second shot gets the kill. Followed by a third for good measure. On the right flank, the T-34-85 is spotted entering the farm area. The attack begins with the Russian infantry charging towards the river from the farmhouse. My infantry has been spotted, and the tanks begin to shell them. I'm thinking that the sandbag foxholes are too easy to spot, and my infantry agrees. In the center, a third T-34-85 appears. It too begins shelling my infantry positions. To counter this, I bring my Stug on the left flank up into a hull-down firing position behind a small ridgeline. A single well-aimed shot causes the crew to dismount the tank. On the left flank, another T-34 is spotted, but can't be engaged. With Russian infantry storming towards the bridge and the river crossing, I bring my right-hand Stug up to engage them. Unfortunately, the Stug is engaged by a hidden T-34 and hit. A second shot kills off my Stug, leaving me with two remaining. This is not a good situation. The loss of the Stug on my right flank has definitely decreased my defensive firepower. I may have to move one of the two Stugs that are now on my left flank back over to the right flank to compensate. In addition to the T-34 on the left flank that I destroyed, and one that disappeared, there's the T-34 that was dismounted but maybe still operational, and at least one on the right flank. As expected, the Russians have seized the farm and appear to be setting that up for a base of fire and observation. At this point, it's still unclear whether the left or the right flank is where the main attack is coming from, or if they'll both be equal. Time will tell. I do make the decision to move the Stug from the left flank over to the right flank, so it begins its long journey backing down the forest road. In a surprise, Russian infantry are spotted down by the river, having crossed the field unobserved. Fortunately, the infantry squad on my left flank is able to engage with enfilading fire down the river. Oh! In the center, infantry from the farmhouse approach the river and are met with withering fire. My weight of fire proves to be too great, and the Russians retreat. Thus, I hold the river line for now. Across the river, the tank crew that earlier abandoned the T-34 that I had hit is seen returning to the tank. I obviously cannot allow that tank to come back into action. My leftmost assault gun is tasked with solving this problem. The tank crew scatters rather than get back into the vehicle. My Stug moves up to firing position to eliminate this problem once and for all. Problem solved. Back on the riverbank, the Russian infantry has regrouped and began firing on my positions on the opposite bank of the river. This is where the weight of their submachine gun fire proves to be too much. My troops flee under the weight of the firepower. The T-34s begin to open fire, shelling my men to keep their heads down so the Russian infantry can advance. In order to prevent their destruction, I do order my infantry to leave their foxholes and retreat to the safety of the woods. This suppressing fire allows the Russian infantry to advance further towards the river. Position after position, my troops turn tail and run. Seeing Russian infantry approaching the bridge, a mortar barrage is called in. With most of my men keeping their heads down, the Russian infantry is able to approach the bridge unmolested, even passing through my one small minefield. My light machine gun team engages the troops as they approach the bridge. Fortunately, this drives the Russians off, again, for now. In the rear, the mortar team makes adjustments to make their fire more effective. Despite the danger, the Russian infantry continue their forward advance right into the mortar barrage. Meanwhile, my Stug is still repositioning from the left flank to the right flank. However, at least at this point, it's making some speedy progress down the forest roads. Back at the farm, more Russian infantry begin to advance down towards the bridge. The T-34s continue to provide covering fire. This pummeling hits my light machine gun team and my command unit, forcing both to crawl to safety. With a gap in my front, my opponent uses the barrage as cover to move his troops from his left flank towards a center attack. At this point, my opponent has managed to get a substantial infantry force close to the river. I have been unable to engage at range with my infantry because the tank shelling is keeping their heads down. I know that I've killed 2 T-34s on the left-hand side, but there are at least 3 more that I'm aware of, 2 of which are participating actively in the shelling. I've had to pull my infantry back from their frontline positions on the river. They can't see, but at least they're protected from the shelling. Unfortunately, my mortar team is now down to about half of its ammunition. However, I do still have my 2 Stugs, one on the left flank and one moving to the center. I hope at some point my opponent brings his T-34s and his infantry more into the open so that my Stugs can take their shot. As if on cue, the T-34s begin to advance. One takes up a position at the farm, while the one on the right flank begins to move towards the bridge. Emboldened by their tanks, the infantry make another attempt on the bridge. My hidden squads on the right-hand side of the bridge open fire. With the help of a mortar barrage, the second attempt on the bridge is thwarted. However, just to the left-hand side of the bridge, Russian infantry have apparently crossed the river and are coming up the slope. I'm wondering if I've already lost. Upon receiving fire from this new direction, my squad near the bridge panics and dies. With the T-34s in the open, I move my left-hand Stug up to engage. However, it gets distracted by some infantry and misses the main threat. Shots from two different T-34s kill the entire crew and put the Stug out of action. This allows the Russians to get back to the business of shelling my infantry. And over this covering fire, more infantry move up towards the river. At this point, roughly halfway through the battle, the situation is not good. I am facing two spotted T-34s and a hidden one, and there are infantry in the center that has crossed the river in force. My infantry has had to pull back into the wood line, which means that they can no longer see troops crossing the river. My forces on the flank, two infantry squads, and a machine gun are not in position to help, so I plan to relocate them to the center. I only have one Stug left, so I plan to keep it in the rear, shooting down the road at any T-34s that try to cross the river. And in other happy news, my mortar team is out of ammunition, so them and their support team will be sent forward as infantry to help hold the line. However, before relocating, my observation post on the left-hand side spots more Russian troops approaching the center and engages. Having done what they could with long-range shooting, my group on the left begins its relocation back to the center to bolster the defenses there. And in the center, my last Stug has arrived at its position looking down the road. Unfortunately, what the Stug can't see is that down by the riverbank, a squad of Russians has crossed, and it begins engaging my last remaining squad by the bridge. In what is a true disaster, the entire squad surrenders. While the assault squad continues forward on its mission, somewhat ingloriously, my men actually surrender to a lowly, dismounted tank crew member. The tank crew member appears to have a vision problem. The Russian infantry continue forward to consolidate their hold over my side of the bridge. Some of my units can see the T-34s begin to move up to support them. There's at least 3 of them, and I realize that I am badly outgunned with only the one Stug remaining. Despite this imminent threat, some of my infantry are very plucky, and they continue firing, this time at some of the transport trucks that are trying to bring Russian infantry closer to the bridge. They're even brave, or maybe foolhardy enough, to to begin firing at the infantry that rode in on some of the T-34s. In the center, the Russian infantry begin to advance up the road. They run into my last remaining cohesive squad on the right-hand side. At first it appears that my forces have turned the Russians back, but more just keep coming, and eventually the firepower and the numbers begin to overwhelm my exhausted troops. Between the tanks and the Russian horde, it's too much. My troops begin to pull back in panic. In what may prove to be just in the nick of time, my squads from my left flank arrive in the center battlefield area. My men engage more Russians moving up from the riverbank. Visibility is poor, so my men are shooting at anything that moves in the trees. The Russians have reached my former positions, and my men continue firing. In the poor visibility, my light machine gun team gets taken out. My reinforcements from the left-hand flank arrive in the nick of time to plug the gap. The close-in fighting is brutal and confused. After an exchange of grenade fire, one of my squads breaks and runs. This is fatal. The platoon leaders managed to keep up the fight. The remaining Russians begin to flee. It looks like for the moment that I've stopped the advance. Fighting climbs down, except for mopping up a few stragglers. The woods grow relatively quiet, and I use the time to move some of my men who previously ran back into position. Ideally, I'd like to amass enough infantry to launch a counterattack to push the Russians back to the river. This thought vanishes, however, when I witness a T-34 cross the bridge. The situation is not good. The Russians have put a lot of infantry and a T-34 onto my side of the river and essentially have control of the bridge. My forces are reduced to the Stug along the road, a relocated heavy machine gun team, the Panzerschreck team, mortars being used as infantry, mortar bearers being used as infantry, the company and the platoon headquarters, and some panicked men. One thing I do remember, however, is that even though the briefing says I'm supposed to defend the bridge, I get points for casualties. So my strategy at this point will become trying to inflict as many casualties on the Russians as possible. To that end, I decide to bring my last remaining assault gun up to direct fire on the Russian infantry and tanks. It begins taking fire from a Russian light machine gun. This is a bad matchup for the light machine gun. On my right, one of the squads that had previously panicked and run away starts advancing back towards the bridge. Unfortunately, this counterattack is short-lived as the squad runs into Russians hiding in the forest. The T-34, which crossed the bridge, begins targeting some of my remaining infantry with shell fire. I try to sneak my Panzerschreck team up close to the bridge to take a shot, but they get cut down. On the left, my recovered troops advancing toward the river run into Russian troops coming the opposite way. A wild, pitched firefight ensues. Combat is nearly at hand-to-hand ranges. Again, my men break and run, but fortunately, so do the Russians. One squad maintains cohesion and continues to advance towards the bridge. As part of the counterattack, I move my Stug even further down the road for direct engagement. It spots and engages some Russian infantry. Again, a distracted Stug falls victim to a T-34 shot, and now I'm out of anti-tank capability. And again, my forces in the forest advance, but this time they run into a particularly nasty surprise. A flamethrower. A bit of revenge is served as a different squad sneaks up and attacks the flamethrowers with grenades. Another T-34 approaches the river. It looks set to cross. This interrupts my soldiers, who are attempting to take care of their wounded and gather spare weapons and ammunition. Behind the tank fire, another Russian infantry attack is underway. Again, in this last charge, the fighting is brutal and close range. As the last turn comes to a close, there's a giant explosion in the small minefield on the opposite side of the bridge. I'm hopeful that this is a T-34 or other important vehicle that has blown itself up on the minefield. This could help give me some valuable last-minute victory points. And as it turns out, unbelievably, I managed to score a minor victory in this battle. Shockingly, my opponent was not given credit for holding the bridge, although it seemed like he did. I did not have very many forces close to the bridge. And so while my opponent was given 90 points for destroying my Stugs, I achieved far more points with my destruction of a few T-34s and a fair number of the infantry. Overall, our casualty numbers were similar, 58 casualties for me, 60 casualties for my opponent, but the casualties I inflicted were simply worth more points. I lost the majority of my force, but they did their job. I only had 15 men left, scattered amongst one infantry squad, mortar ammunition bearers, mortar team with no mortar, the platoon headquarters, and the remains of a machine gun team. Bricklord certainly had a much larger force remaining, and had the game gone on any longer, it surely would have been his victory. I do wonder how much the last second destruction of a T-34 by a mine may have helped my cause. But you know what? That's luck in war, and I will take it along with this minor victory. Thank you, Bricklord, for playing this scenario with me. I do recommend it for relatively new combat mission players because it is well balanced between both sides. We really didn't know who was going to win until right up until the last second, and that's a great way to have a scenario go. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy it. If you have suggestions on how it can improve, please give me a shout. OnePingOnly, and if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.